Last time I made a video on a Saturday talking about trade stuff and the Toronto Raptors, OJ Anunoby got traded. So all I'm saying is keep your Woj notifications on after this one. What's up everybody, it's JJ Buckets. We're going to talk about Pascal Siakam today. I'll give you the more extensive breakdown in a second, but before I fully get into things, obviously usual drill, make sure you're leaving a like on the video. Obviously you know it helps the algorithm out a ton, so I really do appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, plus if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below. If you've been keeping up with Chris Haynes, you've seen the reports that the Raptors are on the verge of parting ways with Pascal Siakam. And I think that brings up an important discussion of whether or not that should still be the case, whether or not that should still be something that's being worked towards. Because after the acquisitions of Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, I think this dynamic changes a little bit. So it's worth having the discussion of whether or not trading Siakam is still the move. Whether or not it's still the move. That's gonna be the discussion today. I'll tackle it from both sides and then you folks can discuss in the comment section which side of it you're on. So on the side of trading Pascal Siakam, I think the main argument hasn't really changed much, where obviously the idea is to build around Scotty Barnes. I don't think that's changed in that dynamic, and again, if it has, if y'all feel more in tune with that, drop it in the comment section below. But obviously building around Scotty, letting the pieces fit around him specifically, and getting younger, right? Like that's also part of it. You want to get younger, you want pieces that fit more so of the Scotty Barnes timeline, as everybody loves dubbing it, loves calling it, loves talking about it. Yeah, the Scotty Barnes timeline, right? Like that's what people are looking at. And Siakam, we know, is on the expiring deal. It's gonna be up at the end of the season. He's gonna be a free agent. There's still no contract extension. I think that's a big part of the equation too, right? Is that there is no contract extension for Siakam as of now. And that's been part of the reason why that trading for Siakam hasn't happened to this point, I would say. I think it's a big part of it. You've seen reports that the Sacramento Kings backed out because Siakam reportedly told them that he's not signing an extension with them, that he wants to make it to free agency and be a free agent. I quite frankly think that the only place he would really take an extension from right now is probably Toronto, which is really funny. Like the management of this whole situation with Pascal Siakam getting traded has been so weird, because it feels like the guy wants to stay. Toronto doesn't want to pay him the max. That's just the vibe that I would say is being received at the moment. So take it for what you will. But quite frankly, I think that's been the vibe the entire time of the situation, right? Like I don't really feel like there's ever been indication that Pascal Siakam does not want to be here, but the team is evaluating whether or not they want him to be here. You know, we're obviously talking about a guy that's been a all-star, all-NBA caliber player, and they're sitting behind closed doors debating whether or not this is a person they want to push forward with. And if it's not a person you want to push forward with, you don't want a repeat of a situation like Fred VanVleet where you lose the guy for absolutely nothing. The problem of trading Siakam though is, and I'll talk about this more extensively later, is with that contract situation, and you've seen it from a lot of the reports that you're not getting the value that you should be getting for a player of Siakam's caliber because of the contract situation, because he's not giving these teams that are theoretically trading for him the assurance that he's going to be there long term. And with that being the case, if you're a team trading for him, like, are you really going to be willing to, you know, put, say, one of your prized possessions of young players on the table for Toronto to take when you don't even know if Pascal's going to be there? I think somebody eventually, if this trade does get done, will want to take that gamble, thinking, hey, we need to make a change, or we want to go over the top with this kind of move. So we're willing to gamble on, you know, Siakam leaving. And in some situations like this, like the guy does end up staying. Like I'm thinking of somebody like Paul George, which is a weird example because he obviously ended up in LA later, but like he showed up to OKC, they took the risk on it, and he actually ended up signing the extension with OKC and taking the contract with that team. So sure, somebody's looking at that situation and thinking, hey, like we could convince him to be here long term based on what we can do as a team, right? And the success that we can have with him being here. But you're still going to be a little handicapped on the return that you're going to get regardless, given the circumstances. But yes, I think the main argument for trading Siakam is you don't see him in the long-term future. You want to get assets back so you're not losing him for absolutely nothing. And you want to get younger to fit pieces around Scotty Barnes, pieces that in theory would fit well with who Barnes is as a player, who some will argue that Pascal is not one of those pieces. I kind of disagree, and I'll get to that in the other section. But yeah, I'd say more or less that's kind of the argument that you're looking at here. I don't think you have to look far to make an argument of why trading Siakam isn't the best course of action though. And I kind of already briefly touched upon this in the last section, but let's start with an obvious one. You're not going to get a great return for him at this point, right? Like, when it comes to Pascal Siakam, again, we know the caliber of player he can be, and quite frankly, I think he can be a great number 2 beside Scotty Barnes, as Scotty Barnes kind of ascends past him. Like, I like to think that's kind of the idea there, because unless you're trading with a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder that can just throw draft picks at you and other stuff without really losing any amount of sleep over it, because they're the Oklahoma City Thunder and they have a fucking treasure chest of draft capital, you're not really gonna get great value back, right? And like, if they don't want to make that deal, they don't have to make that deal, because why would they make that deal? They're in a great position anyways. Like, they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference. But again, my point here being is you're not gonna get really good return on this guy, so why not? And this is the part that obviously I'm not in the front office. I don't know what the thought process is on this whole situation, but at this point, I think giving Siakam that extension is just really not a terrible idea and really just not a bad move. And I think of it for a couple of reasons. Now, first of all, like, I know so many people are going to talk about it's just like, well, you want to build around Scotty, like you want the younger guys. Yeah, but like, do you want your team just completely devoid of like older players, older leaders, veterans that could aid that roster? And like, I'm using the word veteran, like Pascal Siakam's not still a star player. Like, he absolutely is a star player. And again, I think he is a player that's a good running mate for Scotty. I think Scotty and Pascal work. I just think you have to adjust the roster maybe around them a little bit more. And speaking of adjusted rosters, elephant in the room, right? Like, you just adjusted your roster a shit ton with the OG trade, and you got back quickly and you got back Barrett. Both pieces that I think work around these two guys in their own way, especially if RJ can manage to sustain like his good shooting, then I think he fits together really well with those two. I think Quickly obviously fits together tremendously with those guys, and I think Barnes getting better and better will only make this team closer and closer to actually really being a legitimate threat. I think you still have to address a little bit of the big man situation with this team. I like Pirtle. I like him a little bit more than some of the other people. When it comes to Yak, I think he has his value, but let's say theoretically you've managed to make a deal work where you get a good defensive center, because this team definitely needs a good defensive center. They haven't been a good defensive team this year, but you managed to get one that can space the core, right? Like, I know it's a little bit of a tricky mold, and you know, the guy off the top of my head is obviously Miles Turner. Like, for anybody that's followed this channel for a long time, you know I'm a huge fan of Miles Turner, and obviously Indiana isn't really jumping to like give up Miles Turner or anything like that. But you know, let's just say you managed to find that mold of player that can both space the floor adequately and then also be a defensive anchor. That team looks tremendous all of a sudden, right? Like, the better not Pascal Siakam, the better Scotty Barnes gets, the better Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett get, and you still have that good presence of Siakam on that team. That's a team that can compete in the East. I'm not saying right now, I'm just saying eventually, depending on who you want to talk to, of how quickly that eventually comes. I still think you need a few more rotation pieces off the bench for this all to work, but I don't think that's the most outrageous task to go out there and get a couple of quality role players to really round out the roster. All I'm saying is, I don't feel there is as pressing of a need to trade Pascal Siakam after that OG trade, and after you've seen the quality fit that Quickly and Barrett are on this team. That desire to get rid of Pascal, has been lessened, in my opinion. And should you disagree, obviously I'm leaving this bigger discussion to the comment section. I'm presenting both sides of the argument here, and you can let me know in the comment section which side you really stand on here. I think the big problem with this entire situation naturally is just the hesitancy of the front office to pay Pascal, and because of that, it's created this underwhelming trade market, let's put it that way, for Pascal. It's not an ideal situation, right? It's definitely not an ideal situation by any means, no matter which side of the argument you're kind of sitting on here, but let me know in the comment section what you think about all of this. Other than that, folks, I think that's pretty much been me for the day. What do you folks think? It's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one, so I'm interested to hear opinions on all of it. Other than that, that's been the video for the day. So usual drill at the end of it. If you're still watching, thank you. And I'd like to think you enjoyed the video enough to hit that like button. Go hit that like button. Please hit that like button. I'm begging you to hit that like button. Besides for that, folks, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And yeah, it's been JJ Buckets. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will see everybody